Hi, everyone. I am Katia Kane, creator of The Novel Factory and award-winning author. I will be hosting a series of interviews with successful writers in order to tap into their knowledge and find out what makes them tick to help you improve your craft and learn how to get closer to achieving your writing dreams and goals. You can find more of our resources at our website, novel-software.com, where we have a huge library of articles covering all aspects of the craft of writing and becoming a published author. And if you enjoy this video, please do consider subscribing to our YouTube channel. This is the very first interview in the series, and I'm so pleased to be here today chatting to my good friend and incredible writer, AJ Clack. AJ is the author of Lie or Die, which was published by Firefly Press in 2024. Waterstones describes it as The Traitors meets Battle Royale in Clack's pyrotechnic YA thriller, as the contestants in a reality show based on deception start turning up dead. AJ was a winner in the 2022 Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators Undiscovered Voices competition. Lie or Die was shortlisted for the Welsh Fiction competition and was Waterstone's Welsh Book of the Month in March 2024. AJ, it is such a pleasure to be here with you. We made it despite naughty dogs, storms, publicity commitments, and plagues.
Yes, we did. Thank you for having me. I was enjoying that intro. You made me sound very good. Please continue.
Like I said, I say what I see.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you. It's lovely to be here. Yes, the naughty dog is out of the room. The weather is looking good, so I think we're good to go.
Yes, we're a bit, and I've got the plague locked out.
Good.
So yeah, I absolutely loved Lie or Die. It was such a fresh thriller, and I think you're a master of twists and turns and shocking reveals. Love the characters, how they develop and grow over the story, building and breaking trust. And I have been lucky enough to read an early version of the sequel, Blood Moon, and I can confirm it is even more thrilling, darker, and more exciting. We get to spend we get to spend time with some of the characters from the original book and get to meet some fascinating new ones. I don't want to give any spoilers, but I can definitely recommend it to anyone who wants a gripping page turner, which will keep you on the edge of your seat and guessing. So, we're doing this series of interviews to help our audience learn more about what it's like to be a professional author and to gain useful insights and advice. So, I thought we'd start at the beginning. AJ, can I ask, what made you want to be a writer?
That's the question. Is I don't ever really remember deciding that I wanted to be a writer. It was something that's kind of always been there. It's always been with me, I think. And literally from a child, I've loved stories and storytelling and always being immersed in a book. You know, I was such a little bookworm when I was younger. We moved an awful lot when I was a child. So books to me were kind of like my comfy blanket. They were my friends. They were the one constant in a very ever-changing world for me. And I think I just grew up with a sort of an inherent love for stories and story making.
Yeah,
There's
I think
yeah,
I think that's quite similar for me actually. Like I can't pin down like a particular moment, although I can pin down particular memories of stories, terrible, terrible stories I wrote when I was very young. And so how did you go about turning that sort of vague idea of, of that urge into a career?
well, I started more really with storytelling rather than writing. I came from a little, well, settled in a little village in South Wales in the middle of nowhere. So I had this kind of yearning to get to London and to work in theatre and television. So I had a sort of drama background. I was desperate to get into, again,
Right.
storytelling. I wanted to direct or possibly script write, but being from this little place in Wales, I had no idea how to do it. So I went off to university and did theatre and drama. Theatre, I can't speak. Sorry, theatre studies and drama. And from there, I picked up script writing and playwriting, and actually learnt playwriting rather than novels. The idea of writing a novel was just so out there for me. I just thought, it's how can anyone write 300-400 pages at a time? A script was more manageable.
Yeah.
So I started with that and then going into TV and directing and training to be a director. So I was kind of doing the two in tandem. And like I said before, it was really all looking back on it now and sort of thinking about how to answer this question. It was all about telling stories and being a storyteller in different mediums. And it wasn't until I finished the TV side of things and had a family Um, and just as the kids were starting to get older was when I really kind of started taking it seriously, and sort of sitting down and going, okay, let's try this writing thing. Kind of came from that, really.
And do you think that that sort of screenwriting and TV background has influenced how you write your novels?
I think so. I love dialogue,
Hmm.
which I've been told, is one of the strengths of the books, and that is I could just write it all in dialogue quite happily. I always have to go back and cut a lot of it out, and I think that comes from the background in writing plays and having plays performed and directing plays and short films and that. I think so. I think that I've brought that kind of side into the novel side,
Yeah.
which has been quite good. And characters as well. I've always loved characters, and I guess working in theatre and stage managing, production managing, directing is all about finding characters and bringing characters out. So, yeah, I think it's been the two have kind of like, you know, mashed together really well, I think.
Yeah, I also think that there's a huge kind of synergy between screen stories and page stories. You know, people do talk about that they're different things, and of course they are different things. But again, I agree. Like it's story. It's all about story, and it's
Yeah,
all about people, and that's it's just different mediums of doing the same thing,
absolutely.
in my
And
view.
it has to be, it's creating a strong story that lifts off a page or, jumps out from screen, and something that a reader or an audience can identify with and empathize with. So whichever medium it is, you're still getting the same response. So like you said earlier, I have books on my bookshelf that, depending on my mood and my kind of go-to books, if I'm feeling a bit down, there's a certain book I'll go to that I know that I can just completely escape into. And it's that kind of feeling that I love about a good story and a strong story. Even if you know it, you can kind of go back and you can revisit the characters because they become a part of you. And that's really special. I think that's the beauty of books and stories.
Yeah, I agree. It's all about how it makes you feel. And
Yeah,
that's what there's a good quote by Alan Palmer, who is a screenwriter, and he says, they're called movies, so move me. And
yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
great
That's
for books
lovely.
as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking about Lie or Die in particular as well, I mean, it feels like the TV background obviously has quite a big influence on there. Was that
Yeah.
how did you start to develop the idea for Lie or Die?
Lie or Die came from the game. I don't know if you've heard of the game Mafia, which is a party game which has been around since the late 80s, early 90s, which is, I think it started off in Russia as a student's experiment for his psychology degree,
Oh,
where you basically have a group of people, and within that group of people, you have a couple that know all the facts and everybody else is an uninformed majority. So you've got an informed minority against an uninformed majority, hence the mafia or the citizens, or in
ah,
my case, the agents and the players. And the experiment was sort of the informed will always win over the uninformed.
right.
And it's a game that's been around for years and years, and they've done loads of spin-offs from it. Like now, you've got the computer game. Fortnite has started doing some kind of variation of it, and of course, there's the Traitors,
Yeah,
which came out just after the book came out, which is
right.
taken, and it's all based on this game.
Yeah.
So we used to play this in the 90s, and I had a group of friends that we always used to play it, and obviously we used to play at home late at night after a couple of wines. Things would always get really heated,
Huh.
and it used to get really interesting. And I always used to kind of think there's a story in this, in taking this to its extreme. So when COVID came along, and obviously I used to work in television, I used to be production manager. So I had the kind of experience of working in a studio environment. My husband is a television editor, so he works on all the reality TV shows. Um, so kind of we've seen them all from Big Brother to I'm a Celebrity. He's
Hmm.
done all of them. So COVID came, and he was then editing upstairs in the room upstairs while I was writing below. So I had access then to what he was doing and the executive producers and the people that he was working with, and it was all a lot closer. So when I had the idea to write something about Mafia, the whole kind of reality TV thing was literally in the palm of my hand. It was literally upstairs. So the two kind of knitted together, really well, which obviously, the producers of The Traitors were all having the same thought around the
Yeah.
same time. Um, and that's where Lie or Die came from, really. It was putting those two worlds together and seeing what would happen, and it just fit really nicely.
Well, it works brilliantly, and it does feel like it was meant to be. It's one of those stories where you're kind of surprised it hasn't been done before, and it's so yeah, but so interesting to read it and how it, like you say, how it all develops when you take it through to the ultimate end, or like the ultimate point that it can go to.
It's been a really interesting year. I spent the whole year sort of going around and doing talks, and, and a lot of what when I'm talking, I feel myself having to say, this book was written before the Traitors.
Oh yeah,
This
of
book
course.
did come out before the Traitors, honest. Because then it was like, oh well, it's just like the Traitors,
Yeah,
and it's
I
like, well,
see.
actually, this came first.
That's
Um,
interesting. Yeah, so
so that's been really, yeah,
that
interesting. That
and that's interesting, like, the kind of pros and cons, because the pro is Traitors is huge and it's obviously really popular, so that proves that there's an interesting thing, but then in this kind of thing, but then as you say, then you're constantly saying I was there first. So
Yeah,
that's
especially as it's
frustrating.
people that have no understanding of the publishing world and don't know how
How
slowly it
long it
works. So there's
takes,
no
yes.
way that Traitors comes out and they say, well, let's write a book about it, and it comes out the same week.
Oh
No,
God, yeah, yeah,
it would
no,
never
it's
happen.
years,
But
yeah.
unfortunately, these people don't know that. So, well, that's been really interesting about the second book as well, because that's based on Werewolf, which Mafia was first, and then another Russian took Werewolf and changed the characters and made the Werewolf game, which I think
Hmm.
is possibly more popular now with the younger generation. My daughter likes playing Werewolf more than Mafia. So
Right.
it's exactly the same concept, except you instead of having Mafia and citizens in this game, you have werewolves and villagers,
Yeah.
and they introduce a lot of more different characters that like the seer. Spoiler if anyone hasn't watched this season of Traitors. So there's lots of other characters you can bring into it. So opportunity to take the original game and then, like with any series that's popular, when it comes back for the second series, it's going to be bigger. There's going to be more production values. This one is on location,
Yeah.
so it's much bigger. Like you say, it's a lot darker, and it's based
Yes.
on werewolves. So of course, I've got to play around with kind of werewolf motifs and full moons, and so it's been really fun writing the second one as well.
Yeah, it's very atmospheric, and like you say, all of those motifs and the darkness and the location is all spooky, and yeah, no, it's really, I like that.
Oh, thanks.
And so tell us about how you got your agent and book deal. I know writers find that quite an awkward question, because it's like, where do you start? Because it's the whole journey up till then. But I know that new writers quite often are really interested in hearing that kind of thing. How did you actually, I guess, make the final leap from, trying to get published to getting the agent, and then the
I
book
think
deal?
this is I think it's really interesting actually, because I remember when I was out sort of in the query trenches and starting out as a writer, that's your goal, isn't it? Your goal
Yeah,
is to get an agent, and everyone kind of, you're all working, you and your friends, towards the goal of getting an agent, and that
yeah,
seems to be the key. And what we don't realize is that's really just the beginning
yeah.
of the entire journey. And
I remember that as well, and thinking once I get the agent, I'm done. I'm sorted as soon as I get an agent, and
yeah,
then the reality is chilling.
it's like you turn a corner, don't you? And then there's another great
Yeah,
Everest in front of you, and off you
exactly.
go again. And
Yeah.
nobody tells you about that, and it
Mm.
can be quite difficult to kind of get your head around, I think. And for me, it was especially because the agent that I've got now, who is absolutely brilliant, she wasn't my first agent. So I kind of went through this whole process, and I got to that point, and I got my
Yeah.
agent and with a different book, and thought, brilliant, that's it. I've made it. And COVID hit, and the whole thing kind of fell through. The book bombed on submission. It just disappeared because publishing basically just shut down. And
Oh,
about 6 months later,
crushing.
myself and that agent parted ways. So it was completely gutting, and I'd never heard of this happening. I thought I was the only
Mm.
person this had ever happened to, and no, because nobody talks about that stage of things. And of course, it was still in the middle of COVID, and I was left with a book. I had no idea kind of how to progress, or if I wanted to carry on again, and start all over again.
Mm.
So Lie or Die kind of came from picking myself up and giving myself a proverbial kick at the backside, and saying, right, okay, I'm going to give it one more go. I can't. I'd had this idea for Mafia, like I'd said, and I thought, I could see that the UV competition, the Undiscovered Voices, was coming up in a couple of months' time. So I thought, well, let's just write a little bit. I didn't want to waste too much time and energy on it. So I think I wrote the first 12 pages of it, or the first chapter, and threw it into that competition, thinking, well,
So
this will
you
give me
hadn't
the
written the whole book.
motivation
Hmm.
to then carry on. I hadn't written the whole book, and yeah, and then I was lucky enough then to get longlist, and it
Yeah.
gave me that motivation to keep writing it to before the longlist. And that was it. It got picked up by UV. My now agent read the anthology and contacted me, and I was really lucky to have a few agents at that point interested,
Yeah.
and be able to choose the right agent for me. And this time, everything went really well. But yeah, so it was great. It was hard. It's really hard when, yeah, I think every writer has their own story at this part of the process, and none of us find it particularly easy. I don't think there's very few writers that sail through this
Yeah,
process.
I
And the
agree.
more the longer you go, the more authors you talk to, the more you realize how normal this is.
Yeah.
And how there are more stories like mine out there, but people just don't talk about it for whatever reason, which makes you feel very kind of isolated, I think, at that stage.
I
um,
agree. I think so. I think when I started to find out how many people got agents and then didn't get a book deal and changed to agents and that kind of thing, I was like, wow, this is interesting. But I was while it is sort of off-putting, I was really glad to know that at that point, because it meant that I wasn't pinning all my hopes on getting an agent. So I was like, okay, I do want to get the agent, but that actually isn't the end goal. The end goal is to even not even getting a book deal. The end goal is a career, right?
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and I think if you have that in mind and you're aware of how hard it's going to be, then you don't get so crushed, when those disappointments happen, and they just do. I mean, they happen to everyone. I do know one writer who didn't submit to any agents, just entered a competition, got offered an agent, and then got a book deal. And I am like, that never happens. Like, I know a lot of writers, and all of the others, it's like years of rejections, trying to get agents, some getting agents, not getting book deals, getting a different agent, all of that, it's just part of the course. Um, so yeah, I think it's really interesting. And I think it's interesting to me is what you're saying about entering the competition and how that gave you the motivation, and also it gave you that door, right? That's how you found your
Absolutely.
agent, through the
Yeah, yeah,
competition. Because I'm a great proponent of those, because it worked well for me as well. I started entering competitions, and for me it was also a useful validation of that I was getting better, or I was getting somewhere, because I went from getting nowhere to occasionally getting longlisted to getting shortlisted to winning. And I was like, so you could really feel the progression happening, which was helpful, because I think sometimes you can just keep going and going, you have no idea, you don't know whether you're any good or
mm.
not, and you're constantly questioning yourself. So I find that really useful, and of course that's where we met on
Yeah,
Undiscovered Voices,
absolutely.
so
Yeah,
that's the best thing about it.
absolutely. And it's all about learning your trade, and people forget that. And a lot of people, I've spoken to a lot of people who said, "Oh yeah, I wrote a book and I put it out to a couple of agents, and it wasn't for me," and they've kind of given up. But
Mm,
it takes a long time to
yeah.
learn the skills of writing. It's not something that you can just do. And when I look back at the first book I wrote, I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
Sadly, no one else did.
So, what was it like publishing your first book? I mean, that's the dream, right? That all of us are going towards. What did it feel like?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing and quite overwhelming, I think, at the same time. Publishing is a strange beast, and I find, or I've learned that the author, I don't know if you've had the same experience, but the author does tend to be the last one to know any sort of um information. So you're working on a back foot
Mm,
in the beginning. And of course, my book came out just after the second series of Traitors, which blew up. So it went from sort of being quite a quiet debut to exploding, and Waterstones picked it up,
nice.
and it became Welsh Book of the Month. And sort of overnight, I was getting, lots of interviews and having to do a tour of Wales, which I was completely unprepared for. You know, I've been sat
Right.
in this little office for the
Mm.
last however many years, and before that I'd been a mum, and suddenly I was, you know, it was like off you go to Wales and go sell this book, and I was like, oh my God.
Do some public speaking. Everybody loves that.
Yeah, yeah, especially, you know, us introverted writer
Yes,
types, we're really
exactly.
good at that. So it was like, you know, so I found I kind of it went from here to here really quickly, and I kind of was dragged along a little bit to start with it all.
Yeah.
But looking back now, I wish I'd taken the time to enjoy it more. But at the time, I was a little bit like a, you know, rabbit in the headlights. It was amazing, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, but I don't think anyone can prepare you for it really, because there's so many different variables that go into sort of a debut, and no one could have, you know, predicted what was going to happen with Lie or Die and then the traitors and that, you know, happening at the same time. So it was all a bit wild. This
Yeah.
time, hopefully, I'm a bit more prepared and getting a bit better. I remember the first sort of Zoom interview I did. Just I spent a lot of the time just freezing up as I was talking. You know, it was almost like Zoom. I was like, so I am getting better.
I think it does come with experience, doesn't it? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I think experience, yeah, talking about the book, talking to people about it, and also getting feedback, I think must be helpful if they come up to you and say what they enjoyed about what you said. Do people do that?
No, not really. No, they
Okay.
do. People are lovely. People out there have been lovely. And when you get into sort of, you know, reviewers and people that critique it and that, they are lovely. And I think that's the one positive, especially about the children's publishing world, is that everybody is so lovely.
Yeah.
And you know, everybody does want you to succeed.
Yes,
And
I
they are
found that
really
too.
supportive. And
Yeah.
I've made so many great friends just in the last year, and you know, people have been amazing. So that is that's underpinned, you know, and kept me going, I think, and pushed me out of my comfort zone, which is what it's all been about, really, is, you know, getting out there and doing. I think the majority of us as writers are fairly introverted people, and we're
Yeah.
quite happy just to, which is why, you know, we spend our time devoted to a life of imaginary people and characters, and
In
I'm
our
quite
own
happy in
heads.
those worlds.
Yeah, yeah.
When I have to go out into the real world, you know, I struggle a little bit. So I'm getting better, which is good. You know, it's kind of forced me out of that comfort zone and forced me into to doing things that I wouldn't necessarily do.
Yeah, no, I feel the same. I think the idea of going out there, public speaking panels is like terrifying, and I will definitely freeze up. My tongue will turn into a pillow, but I also really believe in getting out of your comfort zone, and I believe it's
Yeah,
worthwhile to do those things. Just have to have a sense of humor about it, I suppose.
yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of where I come from. You know, with it, I was at Yalc in November. I was asked to do Yalc, which was absolutely amazing, and I found myself
Amazing.
sat on a panel. Literally sat in the middle of Holly Jackson and Jennifer Lynn Barnes, and then me, you know, mum of four from Wales in the middle. I was thinking, how did I get here? It was just mad,
Yeah.
but also brilliant, you know, at the same time. And
And
what an
that,
experience.
and I bet were they lovely? Was it
They were really lovely and really supportive, and they really looked after me, you know. And I think Jennifer whispered to me as we were going, she said, "You're with family now." She says, like,
oh,
we're our people, you know, and
how
it was
wonderful.
really sweet, and they really did look after me. So
That's
yeah,
going to
it was
make a
great.
big difference to like being able to relax and sort of just say what you're feeling rather than panicking. And I was going to comment as well about that imposter syndrome as well. I think about that quite a lot, and I think not only does it never go away, but it gets worse
Yeah.
because like the more successful you are, the more you think no, they've made a mistake.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. I'm terrible with imposter syndrome, and it's something that I've really struggled with throughout writing, and
yeah.
especially kind of this year. And social media really doesn't help because,
Mm,
you know, we are forced as writers to put a lot of stuff out on social media, but it's all the good stuff. So all you're seeing out there is everybody else doing better and
sure.
selling more, or you know, doing more events, or everybody, you know, no matter how well you're doing, there is always someone else doing more, and it's kind of in your face. And it's really hard to not compare yourself to everyone else and just to kind of, you know, take the wins that you're getting. And I've struggled a lot with that over the last year.
Mm.
But again, you know, it comes, I think, it comes with time and experience. And hopefully, the old, I don't know, you know, we'll get better imposter syndrome and trying to shake it off.
No, I think it's going to get
Um,
worse.
Don't say that.
I well, I
Don't
kind
say
of
that.
like I
Oh God.
sandblasted it by going to see R.F. Kuang, you know, who wrote Yellowface
Mm,
and Babel and all of that. I saw
yeah.
her do an interview, and she is phenomenal. She's elegant, graceful, like just glides across the stage.
I can
Everything that comes
imagine.
out of her mouth is like intelligent, referenced. She remembers the names of books and authors when asked what they
Oh.
are or asked, about relevant things. And I just walked away going, well, I can never be RF Kwang, so I might as well just be okay with being me.
But also, she's had a lot more experience. I
She
mean,
has.
she's on what, book four, book five
Yes.
now.
She's
So
still
I'd
only
like to.
28 years old, though.
I know, I know. I'm trying to find a half full glass here.
I
Um,
know. Well, she's
yeah,
really,
she's.
she's funny as well. Oh, doesn't even have the
Oh,
decency to be boring. So, yeah. So, but
um,
you can't be her. So, I think we'll just be us.
are you saying that I'm not funny
I'm saying that none of us can be
or
RF Kwang.
interesting?
That is
That's
all.
yeah. Is thanks very much.
You are both fascinating and interesting. Okay,
No,
moving
that's
on.
what I'm saying. There is always someone that you can compare yourself
Yeah.
to, and you'll find yourself wanting. And it just, and what I've also found with this is that people have been doing that to me as well. And is there's me saying, "Oh my
Nice.
God, I'm a bag of nerves. I can't get up in front of people." And people are like, "What are you talking about? You were really good when you did that." Or, "Oh
Yeah.
my God, how did you do that?" And I'm like, it's like they're seeing something very different to what I'm feeling, and that's what you also have to remember is that I'm looking at other people, or you're looking at other people, and we're kind of finding ourselves wanting, but people are also doing that to us, which is a little bit mind blowing as well, and
Yes.
it does also is a kind of weird thing to get your head around. But
Yeah. So let's talk about how you write, like the actual craft, the process of writing a book. So I'd love to hear about your process. Do you do a lot of planning? Actually, you already told me that you don't. So let's talk about that. Do you do a lot of redrafting? Yeah, how do you get from blank page to final manuscript?
yeah, I'm really bad at planning. I'm a total pantser, and actually writing these books, I've had to force myself to be a bit more of the planning type,
Hmm.
because otherwise I just get completely lost. But I have an idea, and then I mull for ages, playing around with it in my head when I probably should be writing it down.
I'm not sure I agree
um,
with that. I think that's
yeah,
really important, that
I
bit.
like to keep it kind of in here, and then
Mm.
my agent now does force me to write synopsi,
Mm.
which I used to have a habit of writing after I'd done the first draft rather
Yes.
than before. So now I do that a little bit more, but I don't tend to stick to them. I will outline chapters, and I will have I tend to do plot first. Where I want the story to go, and then what characters are then going to be introduced into that story,
Hmm.
and work from there. And I do tend to force myself to sit down and write that first draft completely without stops. So it
Yeah.
literally is just, I treat it like a job. I'll sit down, I'll do 9 to 5, and I'll sit down and I'll just write until that first draft is done. I'll write through writer's blocks.
Yeah.
I just keep pushing forward. Try not to go back too much, because I think if you start going back and you start editing, you never push forward. So for me, it's just all about getting forward, getting it done. I tend to write my way in, so I'll come out with a massive first draft, which I'll then read back and realize why I need to plan more, because it's normally really bad. But at least there's something there,
Yeah.
and I find once I've got something to work on, it all becomes a lot easier, and it all kind of opens up, and I can see where I want to go with something.
About how long does it normally take you to do a first draft?
For this one, I had to do from first draft to actually presenting in 3 months.
Right.
So I had a really quick turnaround with this, but
Yeah,
normally a
yeah.
first draft will take me about 6 weeks. But it
Right.
is pants, and I need to stress it is not good.
Well,
It's just literally getting those foundations down and kind of an idea of where the story is going, and then I'll pick it up. I tend to get rid of loads of words then at second, with the second one, and start. It's like the foundations, really. That first
yeah.
draft is the foundations, and then I start building, and then eventually there comes a time, hopefully, when I can take the foundations away, and the story will stand up on its own.
I like
Um,
that. That's a nice way to put
oh,
it.
thanks.
I th
And so
yeah,
yeah, that's kind of my process.
I think that that first draft is almost like the pantser's planning stage. that's where you're working out all of that planning stuff, and you're not doing it on index cards or
Yeah,
mind maps. You're doing it in words, and that's where you're learning it. And one of my favorite writing quotes is by Shannon Hale, and it is when I'm writing a first draft, I remind myself that I'm just shoveling sand so that later I can build sandcastles.
I love that. Yeah, I've heard that
And
before.
yeah,
Yeah, it is, and that's what it's all about. And a lot of writers say that first draft is just for you. It's not
yeah,
to be read. It's not, for public view. It is literally just you getting your thoughts onto the page,
yeah,
and that's kind of how I
exactly.
see it at that stage.
Yeah.
And then there are lots of drafts then ensue from that, which can
Well,
be quite painful.
I do a lot of planning and it's still like that for me. I still end up having to do so much redrafting. I learn so much writing the first draft that I just couldn't, I can write 100 index cards and I do, but it still doesn't tell me so much of the detail that comes out and the nuances and how things interact with each other when until I actually write the first draft. So
Do you find that you're quite flexible with it? Because I do, I kind of give myself a point of each chapter, kind of where I'm coming into the chapter and where I want to be by the end of the chapter. And it sounds really naff, but I kind of let the characters then take me from place A to place B. So quite a lot of the time, there are surprises because the characters will do, or they'll come up with something that you hadn't anticipated, and you'll kind of veer off in a slightly different direction to how you kind of planned in your head. And
yeah,
that's what I find really exciting about it is I in both the first Lie or Die and in this one, there are things that happen that I hadn't ever planned were going to happen, but they have just kind of grown organically from the characters and the location and where they find themselves, which that's the magic for me.
yeah,
That's the bit I love, is kind of when it starts growing itself.
yeah, I completely agree. Even though I plan things in quite a detailed way, I'm trying to hold things more loosely and I try to plan less and I try to allow my imagination to just flow while I'm writing it. And I definitely have had that happen where I'll be writing a scene and I thought something was going to happen and I'm like, but they wouldn't do that. They're not going to do that. That character is not going to do that. They're going to do this. And I'm like, oh, okay, let's do that and
Yeah.
see where that goes. And as long as, like you say, as long as it doesn't veer them off completely off the track of the story, that's okay. And in many ways, it's often more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I really, think that's when your characters and when you yourself as a writer are completely immersed in that story,
Yeah.
is when your characters start behaving in ways that you probably wouldn't want them to.
Yeah. And like you say, that's the
Like naughty
magic.
teenagers.
That's what we live for.
Yeah. But I mean,
um,
I don't write index cards on that, but I'm just looking at my wall behind that you can't see, thank goodness. But I'm a post-it girl.
yeah.
I know a lot of people use Scrivener and write it down, but I have a notebook and I write lots. If I'm out and about, I'll have a stack of post-its with me and I'll write sayings or things I pick up or hear, and they get stuck on my wall. So behind me and my laptop now, there's a whole wall of pictures and different, I don't want to say too much about book two, but specific
Sure.
location and there's a lot of visual references on my wall behind me and a lot of post-its with little quotes and little character notes that I've seen. So if you walked into here, you'd think, what a mess. How on earth does, because it
Or
is
like you're
all
trying to
it's
catch a
all
murderer.
completely, yeah, it's all scattered. But to me, it all makes perfect sense.
Yeah. No, interesting. I like the idea of noting things down, and they say you're supposed to carry a moleskin notebook around and write down things that you hear on the bus, but I'm just always too lazy to actually write them down. So either they stick in the head or they're just gone forever, unfortunately for me.
I used to have a phone, or my phone used to have like a little thing that it was a note, so I could
Yeah.
write down notes that I heard when I was out, which was really good, but it doesn't do it anymore.
I've
So
got one
yeah,
on my
now,
phone. I'm too lazy to open it.
but I'm terrible for listening into other people's conversations. I do
Ah.
it all the time. Tim, my husband, will be talking to me if we're out, and I'll be listening to the conversation on the tape. Then, and he's like, "You're doing it again, aren't you?" Mm-hmm.
Like,
It's
yeah,
really
that's
interesting
going
because
in the
such and
book.
such is doing this and that,
Yes.
and it's so yeah. I'm a bit of a weird stalker, I guess.
Well, I think that's a very rich theme of interesting inspiration for dialogue and characters, isn't it? Stuff you overhear from other tables and on the train.
Absolutely, yeah. And people watching and just
Yeah. Yeah.
constantly watching, yeah, how people engage with one another and interact with one another is people fascinate me. I think the whole kind of reality TV thing I love. It is my guilty pleasure. I love reality TV, and I think one of the things I do love about it is that you're watching, it is just basic people watching and putting
Yes.
normal people into abnormal situations and seeing how they react to one another, and you know, enormous amounts of stress. And I find that really fascinating.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where I think I get quite a lot of my character ideas and that from is just watching.
There's an argument, isn't there, that all stories are about the human condition. So if you
Yeah,
can observe that and in different people, so it's not only your own experience, then I think that puts you in a good place for writing about it and exploring it in stories.
yeah, absolutely. And you need to come from lots of different perspectives, not just your own, I think, to make it rich, you know,
Yeah.
make
What is the most difficult thing? What do you find is the most difficult thing about being a writer or about writing?
I think we talked about it before. I think imposter syndrome
Yeah.
about being an author is hard.
Mm.
That's the thing I think I've struggled with the most. And social media, like I said before, doesn't help
Mm.
with that. There are times that when I'm feeling particularly worried or about that whatever you know, project I'm working on, I won't go on social media. I'll stay off it because I don't. It makes my anxiety, you know, go through the roof. So I'll just
Mm.
stay away. If I'm feeling vulnerable about something myself, it's just best to keep off it, I think. The other thing that I find about publishing is that the whole kind of machine and the speed
Hmm.
of the machine of publishing, I find it takes a while to get used to. I mean, yeah, must definitely know how I feel you know, about this one. I'm used to, with television, I'm used to quick turnarounds and quick deadlines and working to those quick deadlines. And publishing has its own pace, shall we
Yeah.
say? And that in itself, for somebody who doesn't have a lot of patience, you do spend an awful lot of time waiting for
Mm.
responses, waiting in the query trenches, waiting for agents to get back to you, waiting for editors to get back to you, waiting for marketing people to get back to you. There's a lot of waiting and there's a lot of second guessing, shall we say. And I find that quite difficult to cope with sometimes.
Yes, that's really interesting. I know what you mean with that. Yeah, and I think with the yeah, the sort of time from getting a book deal to publication, 2 years is fairly
Two
normal.
years is normal.
Like, yeah, that's kind of mind blowing if you don't know it. Like,
Yeah,
you get a book deal and you're like, great, my dream has come true. I've finally achieved it. And then you're in this limbo for 2 years where you've supposedly achieved your dream, but there's no book on the shelf.
yeah.
And
And you can't talk about it. You know, everything is a secret. So you can't
yeah.
talk about anything. And yeah, I mean, I was lucky with Lion Eye because we were acting, you know, with the whole traitors thing.
I
So
was going to say, I bet they wanted to take
it
advantage of
got
that buzz.
that whole deadline got pushed forward.
Yeah.
So that was great, but it also meant that then the whole edit schedule was completely manic
Yeah.
for that one. So I was literally thrown in at the deep end, and you know, the time it was taking for edits to come back was ridiculous. So it's been quite nice with this one, which has got a longer lead-in time to actually kind of, you know, take my time a little bit more with it. So that's been better, I think. But yeah, from someone who's not very patient and also someone who's a complete control freak,
Mm.
I find it very difficult not having the control that I would possibly like
Yeah. And I
in
think,
this.
as well as being introverts, sometimes as novelists, we are quite, we like to have control of everything because you have, like in the novel, you're God. You're controlling
Yeah,
the plot, the characters, everything that happens.
yeah,
And it's very different to, as I understand it, not from experience, with screenplays where you don't, you lose control very quickly, and there's lots of other people involved in the story and how it's presented and all that kind of thing. And with the
yeah.
novel, at first anyway, you control everything. So yeah, to kind of step from that into publishing where it's out of your hands and there's very
Mm.
little you can do is yeah, it's quite an experience.
And it's coming to terms and realizing that once it's a machine and you don't have any control over it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You know, and letting it go, because you know the book that you've worked on for years and is your baby. You
Yeah.
know, like you say, you put your heart and soul into it, and then you literally just have to give that to somebody else
Yeah.
and trust them with it.
Yeah.
And that's quite hard to do, you know.
Yeah.
That has got better with number two. This one I'm just throwing it at them. Take it.
Yeah, well, yeah, you've got more experience with them now. Okay, so moving on to your favorite part of writing. I guess we covered this a bit as well, but what's your favorite part of writing or being an author?
I mean, writing is, yeah, writing is the writing bit, which sounds a bit, yeah, but you
Quite
forget
straightforward,
that,
really. You forget
yeah,
about the
you
writing
forget
sometimes.
about that because there's
Yeah,
so many other things going on, and it's, I've got to get an agent, or I've got to get this, I've got to get a deal, or now I've got a deal, I've got to get an audio deal, and now I've got to get territories, and now, where's my TV deal, and you're constantly thinking about all these other things that take
yeah,
you away from the reason why we all started doing this in the first place, was that the actual love of sitting down and creating these worlds and these characters. And that part to me is the magic part, and I love that. And it's, you can quite easily forget that, I think, with
yeah,
everything else that's going on and all the other external stresses that then get put on you as an author these days, and going out and marketing yourself and doing all that side of it. I'm happiest when I've got a new idea and I'm sat in this little room with the dogs, and I'm just writing.
yeah.
One thing I've discovered this year that I've absolutely loved is meeting this weird thing that you do this writing in this little room, and then suddenly your story gets put out there and other people read it, which is
Mm,
mad again. But you get so far removed from the process when you are in your room writing, you forget that that is actually the end point of it, and people are going to actually
read it.
start reading, but then
Yes.
they pick it up and they love it. And
Yeah.
I've meeting the readers has been amazing, and meeting people who have loved the books and taken the books on board, and and love the characters, love the themes. That has been unforgettable. That's I guess the dream part of it, and that's the bit that you're gonna absolutely love. It's great, and even the people that don't like it is also quite amusing once you
Yeah.
get past, and because people take your characters and they become real, and that's really strange. I went to I've been to a few book club talks where I've sat, with one I went to in Bath, where I was sat with a group of Bar writing graduates, and I was thinking, oh God, how am I gonna? And but they were talking about the characters like they were real, and they were like,
Yeah.
Cass would, I can't believe Cass did that. She would never do that. And then another one was like, yeah, but she did that because Thea was doing this, and and I was sat there, and they were arguing over my characters and my characters'
Yeah.
motivations like they were real people, and that's amazing,
Yeah.
and you can't beat that feeling, and that's why ultimately that we do this. And I've been very lucky to be in the situation that I've been able to experience that.
Okay, thank you so much for talking to us today. One last question. Do you have any tips for aspiring writers? The classic question.
Oh, it's a classic question, isn't it? I think for me, I think what we've kind of touched on quite a lot through talking is try to remember why you started doing this in the first place. Don't forget that love of writing, and try to separate the process of publishing from writing, because the beast of publishing will make you will try very hard to make you forget why you
Mm,
started doing this in the first place, because it is a beast. And it's a completely different monster to the writing side of things. And for me, that separation is necessary. As you go along, you're in the query trenches, or like we said afterwards, you find an agent and you start stepping to editors, and you're in a process that you have no control over. Whether you get picked up by an agent when you're in the query trenches isn't really anything to do with you. It's not. It doesn't mean that you're a terrible writer if you don't. It's more to do with whatever the market wants at the time, or what that specific agent
yeah.
wants. You have no control over these things. Like with so much in publishing, there is no control. Even at the second stage, when you're submitting to editors, you don't know what an editor already has on their list. You don't know what the next trend is going to be. All these things are out of your control, and it's nothing to do with you. It's not a personal thing about your writing or your story itself. And that's really hard. I mean, I'm saying it now and making it sound like you have it, but it's really hard
It's
to kind
really
of
true.
remember,
Yeah.
yeah, that and keep hold of that it's not you. Once you get into publishing, it's not about you anymore. It's about a big machine, and you've just got to try and ride the wave as best you can and have as much support around you as you can to get you through it. And you will get through it if you keep going. I really do believe that. I think the most published writers are those ones that are the most stubborn more
Yeah,
than the most creative.
and give
And
up.
I'm pretty stubborn.
Yeah.
So I just
Yeah.
keep going.
Well, that
Um,
that really resonates with me. I agree with that. That
yeah,
you and in hindsight, it's so much clearer to see that when I was in the career trenches, I was like an agent put it once. Actually, it's like trying to read the runes. When
mm,
you get a feedback rejection, and you're like, what does that mean? Does that mean they did like it, or does that mean they didn't like it? And it's like, it doesn't matter. You can't
no,
control it. Just
you
keep
can't.
doing your best, and just like you say, if you're stubborn enough, you'll just keep going until you get there, and try and let go of the rest. Yeah, that really,
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to say as advice. It's harder to do.
absolutely.
And I think the way I survived it was surrounding myself with an amazing support group. And like you said earlier, with competitions and that, I mean, we met through a
Yeah,
competition, and that was amazing support. And
yeah,
each step you take, you meet more people, and you meet more like-minded people that you can add to your support bubble that will go on the journey with you. And I think
yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. And once I started finding my tribe, and it was
Yeah.
the information, the kind of cheerleading, the encouragement to carry on, as well as connections, that all of that was so valuable. And that was a huge part of my process in kind of making it forward. So yeah,
Yeah, I couldn't have done it without everybody, without
yeah,
my mates, around me. It is a really lonely process, but you can't do it alone. It's very much a team effort, I think, to get
yeah.
any book on a shelf.
Yeah, and as you said earlier, I think we know in the children's book industry, and I suspect probably in the other book industries as well, people are really supportive, and it's
Mm,
not like we don't see each other as competition. We can all make a success of it. There's room,
yeah,
for everybody who really wants it. Our competition is Netflix, not
yeah,
other writers,
absolutely.
or Facebook or whatever. So yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Well,
I've
thank you for having me.
enjoyed it so much.
Well, I hope that was
Um,
useful. My little muses.
Very. So, Lie or Die is out in all good bookshops now. Make sure you grab a copy, but don't blame me if you get sucked right in and don't emerge until the end. And look out for Blood Moon, which is due to be published. Is it later this year, Ali?
2nd of October.
2nd of October.
Yeah.
And you can follow Ali on Twitter at AlisonClack1 and Instagram at Alison.clack. If you enjoyed listening to this interview, please do leave a comment below and subscribe for more of our content, which is all about improving your craft and achieving your writing goals and dreams. Until then, happy writing.